All right, everybody, I will stop sharing. Can see each other. Great. All right. Well, welcome everyone to our virtual Coffee with a Curator program for November 2022. It's so good to see you all. If this is your first time attending the program, welcome. So good to see you. And thank you so much for making time for this in your Wednesday. If you've been attending, again, as always, thank you so much for joining us. So happy to see you all today. So first of all, happy November, which also means happy Native American Heritage Month. And in honor of this very important time of year, I would like to begin with a land acknowledgement. I'd like to acknowledge that Kennesaw State University is built upon and surrounded by the lands of several Native American tribes and nations, namely the Muskogee Creek people and the Cherokee Nation. Members of these tribes and nations were forcibly removed from their land in the 19th century through a government-sanctioned tragedy we now call the Trail of Tears. I want to acknowledge the injustice and oppression faced by these Indigenous groups, and I'd also like to acknowledge the resilience and cultural vibrancy of the Cherokee and Creek people who continue to play a vital role in the United States today. So again, there are several events happening at KSU and I'm sure in your local community for Native American Heritage Month, so please do take advantage of that. And now I'd like to kind of describe the program that we are going to have today. I think today's program is going to be so interesting. We're going to discuss some of the more obscure practices in publishing, particularly those that characterize the 19th century. And our student researcher and faithful Coffee with a Curator attendee, Andrew Bramlett. Andrew, can you please raise your hand? There's Andrew. Andrew's going to co-lead the session with me, which is awesome. So anyway, Andrew, we're going to go ahead and get started with your regular segment, and then we'll dive into our program. So for those who are new, every time we have a program, Andrew actually changes his background to a bookish place, usually that has to do with the theme, and it is our job to guess it. So Andrew has changed his background once again today. Andrew, do you want to give us any clues, or should we just start guessing?
I mean, you may have guessed it already. It's certainly not the Library of Congress or anything.
No, it's not. Let's see. I think I might know what it is, but I think I might know what it is actually. But does anyone want to go ahead?
Yes.
Andrew's bedroom.
Yep. Yeah, these are just all my books.
And here I thought I was joking.
No, yeah, this is legitimately it. I have my, it's hard to see if I can do the pointing, but it's hard of a virtual background. I have a group of nonfiction books here. All my older vintage books are in this shelf. This is very hard to point like this. But and then I have nonfiction books over here, which are all unread. Yeah, really hard to do, especially when my finger disappears. But it's so.
Andrew, did you make a handout for us?
I did actually. I tried to be as deadpan and serious as possible, but
I love it. Andrew always again makes a handout. So wait, Andrew, where are you right now?
I'm at the library. Let me turn off the background because I'll need it off anyways for the program.
Yeah.
I'm in room 209.
So you are at KSU.
Yeah.
That is so funny. Well, this is great. So again, please do check the chat for Andrew's handout, which will explain the background more. But I think it'll also make sense as Andrew presents, because Andrew has become quite a collector and has an incredible library of his own. And we're going to get a chance to see exactly some of those pieces today because they align with our theme. So that was probably the quickest we've ever guessed where Andrew was. Usually it takes us quite a while because we're somewhere around the globe that we're not able to guess correctly. But that was awesome. Thank you so much, Andrew. And it fits perfectly. So most of us already know who Andrew is, but I'll give him just a very, sorry, I don't want to let my email make noise during our program. Okay. But I did want to give you a slight introduction. Andrew's quite a clever guy. He is a native of Kennesaw, Georgia. And Andrew, I always forget how old you are. Are you 16?
Yes.
Andrew is 16. He's a homeschool student with passions for local history, archives, books, book collecting, and so many other things. He's a brilliant historian, researcher, and can I say aspiring archivist, maybe? Yeah. Something like that. And we love working with him on a weekly basis here at KSU's Archives and Special Collections. So anyway, Andrew is going to discuss this concept of salesman's dummies, which is such a funny name, but it played such a huge role in publishing of the 19th century. So Andrew has shared his screen. Andrew will give you more information about salesman's dummies, and then I'm going to follow up by talking about publisher's advertisement. So Andrew, please take it away.
Well, I was telling Joelle when we were talking about this program, but I hope that at the end of my brief presentation that when you think of dummies, you think of me. So the story of all this begins up in Blue Ridge, Georgia, a book called I Canal in Panama. It looks like this. I have it right here with me. When we got it at this bookstore up in Blue Ridge, it was in like a plastic wrap, so we couldn't see inside until after we got it. And when we did open up, it had like a nice cover page shown here. It's a 1913 book. Had some nice views of the canal itself, construction of the canal. It had a lot of photos in it. Here's a Panama Street as Americans found it, according to the book, and then before and after shot right on the other side. But it also had a couple weird things. You can see this is page 33 of chapter 2, but if you flip the page, I should have done a video of this, it's 52. There's from 33 to 52. And it does that a bunch of times, and it's certainly quite unique. How it just skips over things. But we know that it's not like pages are missing or been cut out. You can kind of see it here. The binding is all the same. So it's not like something was taken out. It was made this way originally. And then at the back, it has this note about I Canal in Panama and goes through all the publication information. You know how it's like first or second Wednesday of the month is like the big emergency alarms? I think that's going off now. Can y'all hear it? Like the countywide test?
No, I can't hear it.
Oh, okay. Might be the landscaping guys. I'm right next to one of the windows, and they've been doing landscaping. There's just a lot of stuff going on out there.
It's
so if it does become a problem, let me know.
Andrew, I can't hear it through your thing, but I can hear it down the hall from my office.
So this book has this nice information all about the book. It's very superlative. New age in history, most important event in history since the discovery of America. It's very proud of itself, obviously. And it also has pages that look like this that show name, address, and price, so they can all be filled in. And this copy, they're all blank. So of course, once we got this book and opened up, we were wondering what exactly it is. It was certainly quite the mystery. And we finally figured out it's called a salesman's dummy, or also called a prospectus, or a BLAD, B-L-A-D, according to American Antiquarian Society. But I like salesman's dummy best. I feel like that kind of captures the idea better. So these were books used by traveling salesmen. They'd go door to door, and they would have just small books like this to kind of give you almost a free trial of a book before you got it. It would have like full publication information. You could sort of see what was inside, what photos you could expect, what the text was like, all that. Additionally, it would have, because the spine was too thin to have like a full thing, it would have a copy of it on the back. You can see here's on the left is the dummy with the spine on the back, and then on the right is the actual full book with the spine itself. And as you can see, they are much smaller than the full book. Both of them right here, see very differently sized. So salesmen go door to door, presumably with like a big box full of these things. One thing I found, I haven't been able to verify this yet, is that more women were actually involved in door-to-door salesmen than in other professions. I haven't found any statistics about that yet, so I'm treating that for grain of salt currently. But it still is something interesting to note. So after getting one salesman's dummy, family decided to get a couple more, and that's what I'll be showing off today. This shows my on the bookshelf, the all the one sitting there. It's on the top left in that image that was in the background. So my oldest one is called The History of the Johnstown Flood by Willis Fletcher Johnson. It's all about a major flood in Pennsylvania. If you're not familiar with it, there was a company that had a massive dam upriver from the city of Johnstown. They should have been maintaining it. Instead, they put that money towards like a golf course or something. Maybe it's like a casino, that sort of thing. And they really didn't maintain this dam, and then one day it just burst and destroyed the entire city. There's a David McCullough book about it, which I need to get around to reading sometime. But this shows the dummy itself. As you can see, it's in fairly good condition. I mean, here's the full book. One thing that's been interesting to note with a lot of these dummies is that the dummy itself will be in much better condition for the book because it wasn't used. It's not like since it's skipped so much you can actually read it. It's probably just sat on the shelf somewhere, or maybe bottom of the trunk, who knows where. But because of that, they've survived pretty well.
Andrew, can I interrupt you for a second?
Yeah.
So I find this interesting. So which one, so you usually will find like the dummy first, and then you will go and try to collect a copy of the full book, right?
Yes. With all of these, I was able to get the dummy beforehand, except for, I'll show it later, the Memoirs of William Jennings Bryan. That one, it actually came with both, which was very nice. I think I was very lucky to find that.
Yeah, that's really great. Okay, sorry, I had to ask, but go on.
Yeah, not a problem. Here you can see that spine again. You can see where the gold lettering has really held up pretty well, whereas on the full book, it's basically gone. All that's left is the impression of it. Inside, it has what's called an order blank, which seems to be just like sort of a form, and it has an important notice, which I can't help but read. Be sure to call attention of your patrons to the fact that cheaply gotten up, unreliable books pertaining to the Great Disaster are being palmed off on the public as histories of a flood. They're made up of irresponsible, sensational newspaper clippings, illustrated with the cheapest of woodcuts, many of which have been used in other works, and consequently cannot bear any relation to the subject in hand. See that your patience is supplied with our work, the only complete and authentic history of a Johnstown flood. American Commercial Publishing Company. This one came in two different ways. You could get it in English and German. Pennsylvania having a large Pennsylvania Dutch population, that makes sense. And you can see this one has been left blank. Also, inside is an announcement from the publisher talking about the book itself. July 10th, if not sooner, about 460 pages. Has a retail price of $1.50. I haven't unfortunately found a good inflation calculator that goes back that far to know exactly how much this book would have cost originally. But you can see here's the title page. Must have been something sort of acidic there, except for where the notice itself is. It's quite yellowed. And then inside it has photos like from disaster relief and of the flood itself. And it has this in fact, like in that Panama Canal book, sort of information about it. Contains a record of the terrors of a flood, statements of eyewitnesses, marvelous rescues and hairbreadth escapes, charity's unparalleled outpouring. It's well illustrated and covers floods everywhere elsewhere. And I'll get back to that floods elsewhere in just a moment. That seems to be a common theme, that these books aren't just about what the topic at hand.
Did that full book have a different publisher, Andrew? Did it say Edgewood Publishing?
That's a
go
great
back
question.
one picture. I think it was different from the American Commercial.
The weird thing is the dummy itself says Edgewood Publishing, but that sales sheet in the front of the same book has a different publisher. Let me check the full copy. It says Edgewood Publishing as well.
Hmm.
So I don't know who.
So
who
the ad, I guess it was the ad that said American Commercial Publishing.
Yes.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, up there at the top. And unfortunately, I don't think it said any of this info says with American Commercial in Chicago. I don't think any of it says where Edgewood was.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
might need to do some research to see if they were related.
Yeah, sounds like I got a project to do.
Yes.
Oh, and the final thing I wanted to show with this book is just that the form itself, you could put in your name, address, and which one you're buying, whether English or German. It doesn't have any of like that information printed as like headings at the top, but that's what these pages were for. Next is a very fun one, The History of Our War with Spain by the Honorable James Rankin Young and J. Hampton Moore. This is about the Spanish-American War in 1898. As you can see, it has this very, very nice cover. It's probably my favorite of all the covers, as it's so very just bright and colorful. But here again, you can see how the dummy is held up much better than the full book itself. The full book is it's quite far gone, that nice blue. And here's the spines. And inside the book, it has the very nice end papers. You can see it's the Cuban and American flags backwards for some reason. And here's this is the back paste down. If I got that term right. Looking at Joy, I want to hope I did. And it has actually another, you could get this one in several binding styles, and it has a sample of the spine of the other style. And this is sample style is what KSU actually has a copy of this book. I was in the Bentley last Wednesday and found it. But you can see here is the title page again, Standard Publishing Company. And it has a presented thing of the covers. You can give it as a gift. And it actually is in the dummy as well, I guess, to show that as sort of an attribute highlighted book. It has very nice color illustrations. A lot of the ships which were involved are highlighted. This one shows the Indiana. Sorry, I think that slides in both ways. And it also talks about the Rough Riders. I love Teddy Roosevelt. I just had to include this photo. Teddy Roosevelt was famously led them up charge at San Juan Hill, which is what this chapter all talks about. It also has the battle destruction of Maine, started for war, remember the Maine and all that. But this one, they got a bit desperate, apparently. Let me pull out the book itself so I can read some of the chapter stuff. You can find the table of contents. Not all the book is about the Spanish-American War. As you can see, here's the capture of the guerrilla about the Constitution, a well-known military activity from the War of 1812. Well over half a century before. And this book, I can't find the table of contents. Well, it talks about the Spanish-American War itself, like the first half of the war. Then it goes into the history of Spain and the New World. It goes into like Grenada de Soto and Ponce de Leon and all that. Then into major U.S. naval activity from history, including the War of 1812 and the Civil War. And then it eventually circles back to the final half of the Spanish-American War. So evidently we're just getting desperate for space and needed in some filler info. This dummy is also a bit unique as it has actually in 3 different languages. This one, I believe, it has English, German, and Swedish. I think this is the Swedish one, but it may be German. And here is the order form itself. It goes into all the info about the book, all the different parts. Oh, there's some of it's listed. Part 1 is about the war. Part 2 is naval battles and victories of the United States. Part 3 is a complete account of Spanish conquest in America. And part 4 is all about the end of revolution of Spanish-American colonies, sort of a bit more information closer to the subject at hand. You can get it in a fine cloth with marbled edges for $1.75, or in the Morocco binding, like that sample showed, for $2.50.
And Andrew, I see at the bottom, it says Norwegian, German, and Swedish editions at the same prices.
Yeah. And I think this book only has, I think it only has 2 of the languages,
Okay.
because in the order form at the back, there's English, German, it was in English, German, and Swedish, but German is crossed out and replaced with price. Swedish crossed out and replaced with binding.
Oh.
So I don't know what happened to Norwegian. It's possible it's in here and I haven't found it yet. I'm not great when it comes to Scandinavian languages, of course. It's never been relevant. So I'll have to look into that.
Mm-hmm.
But this one also has a publisher's guarantee to subscribers pasted in the back. You can fill in the name of the book, the price, all that. Yes, it's sort of almost like almost a seat of sorts. See, next is A National Calamity by Flood, Fire, and Tornado.
Hey, Andrew,
Yes.
those backward flying flags, I don't know the full story here, but I know that on some of the American military uniforms, the patches have backward flags. So there's a connection there, I think, because this Honorable James Rankin Young must have been retired military, right? Probably.
I think he was in Congress at the time.
Or Congress, yeah.
Military.
Yeah.
I know when it comes to when soldiers' uniforms, the flags are backwards. That's supposed to be like the soldier looking out at it, sort of like facing towards them.
Yeah.
So it is possible that's how it works. It seems a bit weird that would be connected to a book, though.
Yeah. Interesting.
And it's possible. Let me check the full book if I can't say that same way. The book was just an error. No, the full book has it backwards as well. Huh. So, A National Calamity by Flood, Fire, and Tornado is one of the sort of a weirder ones by a man named Logan Marshall, best known for writing A History of the Titanic shortly afterwards, which also has Salesman's Dummies out there, fortunately they're like $2,000, bit outside our price range, but still there nonetheless. Logan Marshall, I actually looked him up, and Wikipedia, of all places, says that he was a hack writer. Ringing endorsement there. But it said that after major disasters, he'd write up something pretty quickly, like about the Titanic, and get it published quite quickly. And that's what he became known for. This is all about major disasters of the year 1913. Evidently, just a lot of bad stuff happened. But it doesn't seem to be like it's all one big disaster, one big fire, flood, a tornado. It's just a bunch of small little events scattered throughout the United States. And here's the full book along with its dummy. And it's a bit hard to see, but the map of the United States actually wraps around, both on the cover and the spine, which is nice. And all the locations listed on it are places covered in the book. And you can see here the spine, the back. And this one has a special notice in the front, which contains a warning: beware of catch-penny books hastily prepared from newspaper clippings. This work is by an experienced writer, based upon the actual statements of survivors and eyewitnesses. See, the books you deliver have the name of Logan Marshall, title page.
Andrew, can I just make it's fascinating because when you show us a lot of these special notices, or we're seeing, notes from the publisher about why you should get this book, it's so, I think, indicative of this time period of the 19th century, because in previous centuries, books were just so much more of an exclusive, commodity for people. They were usually large, leather bound. Only, very wealthy people could afford them. Only, certain people even knew how to read them. And now it's like I feel the urgency of these publishers who are now, they're in competition with one another. Books are being made more cheaply. They're being made faster. Publishing companies are gaining strength, and they're trying desperately to get people to buy their books. And by any means necessary here, even if it means you're probably going to see errors in this, in this prospectus, or, hey, this book is, this book will, and they're trying to get, attach status to a certain publishing company name. And it's just interesting to see that they are clearly in competition with one another.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think I didn't mention with this one, if on the thing, it does mention this prospectus is prepared in great haste. As I said, he was a hack writer, and is only intended to indicate what the complete book will be. Any error may appear will be corrected. The complete book will be a permanent historical record of the greatest calamity by flood, fire, and tornado in the history of America. And one thing that really threw me off, this is part of it that kind of threw me off, is that it seems to talk about the great calamity by flood, fire, and tornado as if it's one event, as if it's one great disaster that took place that year. But really, it's just a bunch of small things all put together to try to, and all sold as this one big thing, presumably to sell books like that, try to make people want to buy it. This one also has a nice frontispiece just labeled "Stricken" of some type of personification crying next to a broken column. And it has a lot of illustrations to it, photographs. And here's the back of the book with that salesman's info along with the form. I don't remember if there was anything unique about this one. Yeah, the complete work contains over 250 pages, including over 50 photographs and sketches of scenes of the disaster, and is furnished to subscribers at the following exceedingly low prices. So like you said, trying to make sure that convince people that anyone can get this book. Cloth binding was only $1 at the time. And as you can see, it mentions a half Morocco binding and doesn't have like a sample of that binding at the back like the Spanish-American War book did, but it does have an illustration of it, which presumably would have only been made for this book. Whereas a lot of illustrations are like just from the full book itself. This one seems to have been made just for the prospectus, which is, I think, of note. The memoirs of William Jennings Bryan, he was a failed presidential candidate, if you don't know about him. Ran 3 times, lost each time. He, in the 1896 Democratic National Convention, he gave his Cross of Gold speech, considered the greatest speech at any nominated convention in U.S. history, even if it didn't win him an election. This was published by Bryan and his wife. It was published after Bryan himself had passed away. Oh, he also was the prosecuting attorney in the Scopes Monkey trial, is his other big claim to fame. And you can see here's the book itself along with its prospectus. It's a much thicker book than the others. And the back. And the larger version was published for the Bryan Memorial University, the Dayton, Tennessee edition. And one interesting thing of note about this book is that the title page of the prospectus doesn't have a publisher listed. And the copyright owner, instead of being a publisher, is his wife, Mary Baird Bryan. Only the full book itself has a publisher. So I'm wondering if she didn't try to if the prospectus was almost before she had a publisher picked out, before some type of deal had been finalized. I don't know what's going on with that. Here's Bryan himself at his desk. He was Secretary of State at one time under Woodrow Wilson. And here's one, this is a book discussion group after all, I had to include one of him with Tolstoy. And finally, that Cross of Gold speech I mentioned. His final lines were, "You shall not press down upon the brow of labor this crown of thorns. You shall not crucify mankind upon a cross of gold." His big deal was getting rid of the gold standard, in part of a free silver movement in the Populist era, which is what he's referring to in this speech. And then finally, here's the back itself. This one was a bit more expensive. It was $3.75. It is a larger book after all. You also get a full Morocco grained craft binding for $4.75 or a full leather binding for $5.75. It's the largest, best illustrated, most valuable book ever sold for the money. Clearly quite superlative though. And then here's the form in the back. So the final book is a bit different. I don't have the full copy of it, but become evident why in just a moment. But it's great events by famous historians. This is a 22-volume set. I don't have space for anything like that. They were very expensive. From 1905. That is world history written up by notable historians of the day. You can see here's the sort of the end papers. It's more like a velvet type thing. And here is the title page. You can see the editors and who sort of a brief description of it. It has some nice illustrations. Here's Joan of Arc. but it also has all the binding samples. I included pictures of two of them, unfortunately. But I can show some. These are incredibly nice. You could get the book and it would like vary between, listen to 20 volume set, you get like multiples of each binding. You could pick out which ones you wanted. But they have the binding itself and information about where sort of it came from. This one is a replica of a book for Henry VII, Henry VIII, it looks like, to Pope Leo X. It's quite unique, as Henry VIII is the one that made the Church of England bug off of the Pope. So that's sort of an thing of note there. Divorced, beheaded, died, divorced, beheaded, survived. And this one is what I used for the slide background, and it was made for Glorier, Treasurer General of France at one time. But it has 10 or so of these. Let me reach the end of the slideshow. I'll turn off the screen sharing. I don't know how well you can see these, but like here's that first one I showed. A very unwieldy book, so it's played chess. Here's on the back side. This one was for Henry VIII as well, originally. There's another of French ones. See on its back. It's that one I just showed. Here's this it says is a French one as well. And this one is for Henry IV. And unfortunately, it doesn't show the spine. The spine on these books was pretty uniform. It will just change on color based on what binding was. So that's reached the end of my presentation. Are there any questions? Yes.
I actually have a question because I see we have, is it Corinne from Big River Bindery? This is such a cool topic, and how can you not love these books? And it's funny to see how it really is all about the packaging. The content is kind of like, it's sort of sensationalist. But my question for Corinne is, I mean, do people obviously, you have clientele who are interested in pretty bindings, and what kinds of things do they like to bind?
Well, can you hear me? I just unmuted it. So, okay. Yeah, well, for the most part, the family Bibles are, people who've had them in their family for a really long time. And so we get to educate them a little bit about, like where it came from. For the most part, they just want it fixed to get back to as close to its original state as possible. But some of the things we've seen come through have, it's the Bible, so all the text is the same generally. But we've had some really good full page, full color illustrations. We've had some black and whites. Some of them come with full histories of, the Bible or world history in the front or in the back. Some have tons of copies of family genealogical pages. The Temperance Pledge is always fun because sometimes the family pages are filled out top to bottom, but that Temperance Pledge is blank. Nobody's signing that page. Or sometimes there's not even a pledge in the Bible, or it's been ripped out. But a lot of times it's, it seems like the covers were more or less standard. A lot of them have, I don't have one right in front of me at the moment. I just finished one the other day. But they have cutout shapes, and it's been molded and got all different kinds of complicated repair aspects. But there's lots of different kinds. For the most part, they're just kind of getting them from their family and passing them around.
That's fascinating. I don't know why I never really thought about the, that they would be like, salesman's dummies for family Bibles and people, but that completely makes sense, of course. Best-selling book for a long time, especially during that time.
Yes, definitely.
So that's fascinating. So Andrew, I have a question for you. Is just kind of how difficult do you find it to collect both I know that last book, it's like a 22 volume set, so that's a little bit difficult, but in general, is it pretty easy once you've gotten the dummy to find a decent copy of the full book?
It's been actually surprisingly easy. Once we find the dummy, we've usually been able to find those just on eBay or ABE Books, because it was meant to be the full book, like mass produced, traveling around everywhere. It's been pretty easy finding a full copy.
Interesting.
Which has been we've been, I think, pretty lucky to find a lot of these.
Right.
Some we have gone looking for, like the dummy itself and see if we can find the full book just to make sure that it is actually out there. I think there was one or two but we ended up deciding against just because we couldn't find both.
Right. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Andrew. That's just fascinating. And I love that you are creating this collection. I think this is so unique, and it's just so cool. So thank you for sharing a bit of your collection with us and educating us on Salesman's Dummies. So for the remainder of our time, I'm going to talk about another kind of interesting aspect of 19th century publishing, and something that we have some really great examples of from the Bentley collection. And also, it's a very hot topic in the bibliography world, in the world of bibliographic studies. It's a surprisingly hot topic. And that hot topic is advertisements. According to ABC for book collectors, which if you don't have that book and you are a book collector, I highly recommend it. The 9th edition. It has pictures in it. It is amazing. But if you go in ABC for book collectors and you find advertisements, it will say this in the definition. It will say, advertisements have engendered as much heat and argument as any factor in book collecting. So that's the quote. So I know what you're probably thinking. You're probably thinking, how in the world could the presence of advertisements in a book spark heated debates among bookish people? Why would they get in fights about that? Well, they do. And here are the two main questions that bibliographers are usually asking and debating when they view advertisements. One, were the advertisements printed alongside the main text, and are they integral to the printed book? That's one. Number two, who was responsible for the advertisements? Was it the bookseller, the publisher, a wholesale distributor, or was it just someone else? So we'll start with the first inquiry. Are the advertisements integral to the text? So there are two types of advertisements that you'll see in books, especially books of the 19th century and earlier. So these are the leaves of advertisement, which were they were supposed to be part of that book. They were printed along in the same operation with the paper for the rest of the book, and they were intended to be bound alongside the main book. So the book is not considered bibliographically complete without these advertisements. These type of advertisements date back to the 16th century, and they were really common in English books of the 17th and 18th centuries. So I have an example for you where the advertisements are literally part of the book. I just have a picture for you. And this is from, let me see if I can get this picture up. Okay. Screen share. Let's see if we can do this. Okay. So this is a copy of the Bentley Rare Book Museum's An Essay in Defense of the Female Sex from 1721. This text was originally published in 1696. So this printing was done 25 years later. So this is the title page. And that we say it was printed for S. Butler. S. Butler was a bookseller. And in the back of the book, we have, after the main text is over, we see these books printed for S. Butler and in St. Bernard's Inn in Holborn. So we start to see these advertisements for different books that S. Butler is selling. So we see here, this first one is a religious book. We've got, let's see, this is a religious book. We've got, I think, a medical book coming up. Yep, here, this Dr. Lauer, several other physicians' receipts. We've got a medical book. Let's see what else S. Butler. S. Butler's also selling a grammar book. So we see, that these are advertisements for other books that S. Butler is selling right now. So how do we know that this is clearly a bookseller's advertisement? How do we know that this is integral to the printed book. Well, if you were to look at this book, if I were to hand it to you, you would be able to see that it looks like it's the same paper. It's the same type of paper. It looks the same. So by observation and touch, you can see that. And then you can also, this book also has 11 gatherings of printed leaves. So 11 sections of printed leaves with 8 leaves per gathering. So when I am making a collational formula for this book, I was able to determine that we need these advertisements to complete the last gathering of the book. The book would not make, it wouldn't really make bibliographic sense without these advertisements being included. So again, the book is not complete without these ads. So the ads are part of the book. The printer meant to put them in there. And so that is how we know that the book is complete. But then we have some other types of advertisements from publishers that are not actually, they were not unique to that book. These advertisements were more so like lists or catalogs, and they were really common in the 19th century. So what would happen is a publisher or a wholesale distributor would provide the binder, and the binder is the person who's folding and sewing the printed book together. So the publisher would say, give to the binder, here is a catalog of all of the different books that we want to advertise. So put this at the end of all of the books that you're going to like put together for us, that you're going to bind for us. So the binder would. However, if the binder didn't receive those lists or catalogs in time, the binder wouldn't wait for them. He would just bind the book up anyway. If he had catalogs and ran out, he wouldn't, or if he didn't have enough catalogs, or if he like ran out of them, he wouldn't get stressed. Some copies would have those catalogs and others wouldn't. Or if the binder had an old, outdated catalog from the publisher, he might say, what the heck? And he would put that at the end. So there's a lot of lack of consistency. So books like this 19th century book, The American Woman's Home by Catherine Beecher and Harriet Beecher Stowe. So probably know Harriet Beecher Stowe from Uncle Tom's Cabin, but she also wrote this book with her sister about how to be a good moral American woman and how to have a home. But there are a lot of ads in the back of this book. And I was kind of curious about these ads and whether or not they were part of the printed book, or were they just a generic list of books that the publisher wanted to advertise. And we see here that there are some clues. So when I looked at the book in person, the paper quality looked kind of similar. So I couldn't really, it looked pretty similar, but it's machine-made paper, so I don't expect the differences to be extensive. But I did notice that in this book, all the pages are numbered, but these advertisements are not numbered. So that's the first clue that maybe they weren't really part of this book at first. And then we can take a look kind of at this at this first part here. I can try to zoom in. The publishers say, we would respectfully ask the attention of the reading public to the books which they have published during the year 1868 through 9, and those which they have in contemplation as set forth in the following pages. So it's telling us that, okay, the publisher is basically going to tell us books that they've published over the last year. So that tells us something. So we see religious book, and we see a lot more books, and we see their prices and kind of see what they're about. But then we see something else. So this is an ad here, The American Woman's Home. This is an advertisement for the book that we already have in our hand. So that's kind of making me think that this was just kind of a generic, these ads are part of a generic catalog that the binders would kind of sew into all of the books published by J.B. Ford and Company. Because why would you give people an advertisement for the book that they already have? This is probably, again, just an overall catalog. Another thing that I want to point out is here. Let's see, where did I want to point it out? Oh, I guess I'll point it out later. But anyway, so we see additional books that, again, that the publishers, so they've been very busy. But anyway, so that's an example of what I would think would have been kind of like a catalog that was just inserted at the end. A similar example would be Mark Twain's The American Claimant here. This one is unique because the publisher is Charles L. Webster and Company, and this is Mark Twain's publishing company. The company was severely floundering by this point and was 2 years from declaring bankruptcy. Mark Twain's works always sold well, but a lot of other books that the publishing company published did not sell well. And we see here again an example of advertisements, and we see Mark Twain's book says "Just Ready," so it's first being advertised, which is pretty cool. And then this is one of my favorites. I don't know if anyone's ever read "The Innocents Abroad" by Mark Twain. So this was a book that was sold by subscription. And Andrew already told us a bit more about, what it meant for a book to be sold by subscription. So anyway, it tells us here that, the subscribers, they would respond to a preliminary proposal for a book, and they would usually be asked to pay some money up front. This would subsidize the book's overall publication costs. And then the subscribers' names would sometimes be listed in published copies of the books. By the way, that is one of the reasons why we know what Jane Austen used to read, is because she would be she was a subscriber to certain books. And so she would sign up for that. So anyway, there are a lot of really interesting historical connections we can make through subscription logs. But this is an example here, which is fascinating. So this first paragraph basically explains the subscription process and why it's beneficial. And then we have this second paragraph. Again, this publishing company says that basically saying that their books are a symbol of status, and the publishing company has status. And it says that this publishing company publishes nothing but books worthy a place in the libraries of the educated and the refined. So again, making you feel like you are more refined if you have a book like this in your library. And then we've got here at the bottom, which is kind of related to what Andrew was saying, it says we want agents throughout the country. And it's giving you kind of the profile of who might be a salesman or a subscription agent. And they say disabled soldiers, aged clergymen, teachers, students. I mean, they say invalids, which is not an appropriate term anymore. Young men who wish to travel. And then, like Andrew was saying, women who can devote time to the work often make the best of canvassers. So I find that interesting. And there's more to I think, research there. But we're seeing that they actually, not only are they trying to get people to sign up to pay for, to sign up as subscribers, but they're actually trying to get agents as well to help sell their books. And finally, the last one is very complicated. So this is the final type of publisher's advertisement that we're going to discuss today. So this is a book that was issued in parts, which was common during the 19th century. This was a book that was essentially, or a story that was serialized. It appeared in 6 parts. And so long story short, a lot of times when people would have books that were serialized and then they would get them bound, they didn't always know what order to get everything bound in terms of the advertisements, especially. It's because things would just get mixed up. And then sometimes, even in the actual serials, some advertisements would appear in certain copies. Some advertisements wouldn't appear in other copies. You see in the Bentley in our copy here, we've got advertisements that are tiny, that are big. This is all for this story, Whom to Marry and How to Get Married in Search of a Good Husband. So this story appeared between 1847 and 1848, and again in 6 parts. So there are advertisements everywhere. But the person who had this all bound, the way they chose to do it was they had all of the text bound at the front. Then they put all of the advertisements that appeared. They put all these together. By the way, some of these advertisements are not even for books. Some of them are for like lotions and cough suppressants. And I mean, there are so many advertisements. If I were in the office today, I would show you how thick the advertisements are for this 19th century serialized text. There's so many. But then the person who had this book bound did something really interesting. So they had the main text at the front. Then they had all the advertisements that came from all 6 issues. And then they put all of the covers, like all of the paper covers in the back. So you can see, this is like, for example, part 3, and it tells you this is to be completed in 6 monthly parts. So they put all of the covers in the back. So the reason why bibliographers sometimes are, trying to figure out what was the original intention of the printer, what order were these ads supposed to be in, and which ads were really supposed to be. So, it kind of depended. I think that in these serialized cases and these serialized pieces, I think what would happen is, what did I have it? Oh yeah, there would be publishers would create contracts for a certain number of advertisements and insertions, which meant that, again, these ads didn't have necessarily anything to do with the publisher. It's just different companies would pay to just have their ads put in these because they knew a lot of folks were reading them. So anyway, it's just difficult for bibliographers to know what's going on. So anyway, wanted to show just a couple interesting parts of kind of 19th century publishing, especially with ads, because usually ads are fun to look at, and they're fun to kind of, to see what people were interested in during that time period. And yes, agreed, Tamara, love the Cruikshank illustrations as well. But actually, they do play a role in the book bibliographically, and sometimes it can be difficult to figure out, okay, did they belong here? Did they not? Is the book complete without them? Is it not? And people have different views on it. So anyway, does anyone have questions about advertising? Those are just a couple that I found from the Rare Book Room that I thought were interesting. Any comments or questions about that?
Since we've talked a bit about presidential stuff, I do, of course, have to share one of the advertisements in the American Woman's Home by Harriet Beecher Stowe was for a book by Horace Greeley, who in 1872 became the first vegetarian and socialist major party presidential candidate.
Go
wow.
He lost to Ulysses S. Grant, who was running for a second term at the time, and he passed away in a mental hospital shortly after the election.
Oh my goodness. Andrew, I don't know how you know that.
I read a biography of Grant, which talked a lot about it.
Ah, I see. Fascinating.
I just wanted to say it's just so this is one of the reasons I just love older books, because they have so many different features besides the again, anybody who thinks books are all about just the content, there's so much more to books, and these advertisements and the salesman copies and all of this really gives a window into broader sort of cultural trends going on at the time. And you really feel like you have a much better sense of sort of the sensibilities of the age, looking at these advertisements and looking at the styles of binding copies. It's just such a wonderful treat, I guess, to look at these. And I know that I know students always find them highly engaging because, we're bombarded by advertising all the time, but I guess we're not used to it in our books in that way. So maybe that's why it's interesting to students. But anyway, kudos to both of you. This is just a really fun session.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's fun. And it's, if anyone is interested, I mean, again, like I know Andrew always loves to share his collection and he's here every week. And then all of the texts that I showed are part of the rare book collection. So if any, I mean, there's so much research that can be done with these. And it's really cool to also just kind of look at them together and see how they are put in conversation with one another. So if this interests you, if you're a student, if you're not a student, it doesn't matter. Please do just let me know, and you can make an appointment to see any of these materials. I would, I'll have to say, I had way too much fun preparing for, I didn't even say half the things I had written down because there's just so much to explore in these books. So overall, the story of the day is that dummies and ads are very intense. They are very bibliographically intense, and there's a lot to see there. So I really hope that this maybe can spark your interest in some of this kind of 19th century publishing and the like. So anyway, I'm going to end the program about 4 minutes early because I have to get to my daughter's Thanksgiving feast at her school. So I'm going to run over there. I want to just tell everybody, just want to say happy Thanksgiving, and I hope everyone has a wonderful, a peaceful, restful, and delicious Thanksgiving and a great week next week. And then also we have our final program of the semester is going to be, it's scheduled for December 7th right now. And for those who have been attending this program, we keep it flexible in December, and usually we're going to probably do our favorite things. So be prepared. I hope you have some favorite things you'd like to show us, some favorite books, favorite book collections, whatever. We're just going to use that time to celebrate all of our favorite things. So get ready for that. You'll be seeing emails about that. Anyway, thank you all so much for joining today. I hope you learned a lot, and we'll see you next month.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.